All right. Welcome to the Allison Loves Math podcast. I'm super excited to invite, sorry, let me start over. Invite, they're the same words, you know. All right, one more time. Welcome to the Allison Loves Math podcast. I'm super excited to introduce today's guest, Melissa Dean. So Melissa is a math education disruptor and the infamous blogger at Dean of Math. So you might have read her piece, Unpopular Opinion, Kids Don't Need to Memorize Multiplication Tables. So she has 17 years of classroom experience spanning from grades 4th through 12th. She's passionate about revolutionizing assessment and evaluation, mathematics instruction, and curriculum design. She's equally passionate about coffee, like me, bullet journaling, which I do also, and cool pens and running. So today we're talking about ideas to radically reimagine your math class. And nobody has more ideas than Melissa Dean. So I'm super excited to talk to you about this today. I guess just to give a little bit of back history or whatever on my part, I really feel like every time I read your blog, Melissa, I feel inspired, and I feel like you just, as a writer, you have a gift for really pinpointing, why I'm frustrated with certain things in the classroom, why I really feel passionate about, certain aspects of teaching. And so, I don't know, I feel like you are the perfect person to talk about this today, and I'm super excited. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm super excited to be here. And I'm really glad to hear you say that because, when I write, when I share my blog, I do it out of a hope that what I write will resonate with other educators and that they will feel that kind of spark of like, oh, you know what, like that's something that bugs me too, or that's something that I feel frustrated about too. And oh, you mean there's other people out there who are frustrated by that as well?
Yes,
And
yes.
okay, and so if I'm feeling frustrated about that, like what's a thing I could try to move past that? So that's always my goal to share. So I'm super glad to be here. I'm super glad to hear that my purpose in writing is getting out there. That's why I love what I do.
Absolutely. So before we talk into ways to reimagine our classroom, let's first, talk about math classes today. What are some of the problems that you see in math classrooms today?
I think, Allison, I could summarize it in realizing that the person who is doing the thinking in most math classrooms is the teacher. And students are kind of just sitting there passively taking in somebody else's thinking. I find, or I used to find, when I was teaching math, when I first started my career, even in other disciplines too, but particularly in math, I would feel like exhausted at the end of class because I had been doing all the work. I'd done all the thinking about what's the concept. I'd done all the thinking about how am I going to teach my kids? How am I going to get them to also get the concept? What problems will we do? What notes will we take? What homework questions should I say? I'd done all of the thinking about it, and left class feeling like I have nothing left to give, and the kids are just like, okay, like, all right, what's next? Right? They're just kind of passively taking it in. So when I think about like what right now in the moment, maybe not just in the moment, but what the way I talk about it to my colleagues when they ask me is that who's doing all the work, who's doing all the thinking, and all of that thinking, all that discovering of the math, the coolness, the way the numbers work, the patterns, the formula, the algorithms, why they work, all of that is being done by somebody else. It's being done by the teacher, and the kids miss out on that. And then therefore math just becomes this like performance subject where, kids are worrying about, how fast am I getting it done? Do I have everything memorized? Do I know all the steps? Am I better at this than somebody else? And if I don't know it quickly, does that mean I don't know it? And this, I think that's where this anxiety comes from, because in instruction, the teacher does all the work, and then we give them this assessment that says, okay, now you do it. Well, no wonder there's a sense of panic and dread about that, because they haven't really like actually done it yet. They know some math, but they haven't done any math. So that, I think, is the root of the things that we need to revolutionize, is who is the most active person. And if the kids aren't doing just as much thinking as you are, then I think that's where we need to start, by flipping it on its head.
Yes, no, again, you're always putting into words things that I feel. And I think that is such a good summary of how I've felt with teaching at various points. And I think especially with starting off, there was so much stress on my part as a teacher, right? About how can I explain this in the absolute simplest way? And in a way, I'm doing the thinking for them, right? I'm saying, how can I teach this so they have to do the least amount of thinking possible in order to learn it? And I've definitely gradually am moving away from that to how can I challenge them to think for themselves? And that's a lot more confusing to actually do. It's much easier to say, how can I make this as simple as possible? So I do very much love that. And let's talk about some ideas to do that. What are some tips for teachers, who maybe are feeling that sort of that stress, who want to maybe deviate from that? What are some suggestions that you have for them to think about, or try out, experiment with?
Wow. How much time do you have?
I know there's so many. Let's pick a few and have some fun with them. I know.
There's so many places where I feel like it could start, but absolutely the first place I always tell my colleagues or other people who come to me and say, okay, I need to change something. I don't know. I think a lot of teachers have this vague kind of feeling of unrest about it, but don't really know like what it is or where to start. So absolutely the first place I always send people is, the minute your classroom starts, the thinking has to begin, and not by you, by the kids, as soon as they come in. So the best way to start that is to start your math class, every math class, with a conversation piece that asks kids to actively engage their brains. So there is a plethora of interesting math images on the internet, and now that we all have phones in our pocket, while you're walking around, if you see a picture that looks vaguely mathematical, take a picture of it, put it up on your screen, or show it. You can do this online too. This is not, the classroom is not confined to your space in a physical room, right? Our classroom is a community of people who are learning together, and that happens wherever you are. Show your kids a picture and ask them two simple questions. What do you notice? And what do you wonder? And I guarantee you, the first time you do this, they will stare at you uncomfortably for like a really long time, and you'll because kids have learned, especially in math class, but all subjects for sure, but especially in math class, if they wait you out, you will do the work for them. Because they're like, that's what they're used to, right? They're used to like, well, if I sit here long enough, the teacher will tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, it's like my kindergartner is learning how to read, and it's the same sort of thing, right? I'm listening to him as he's reading, and he tries so hard to say, oh, I don't know how to do that word. I don't know how to sound it out, hoping that I'll just tell him what it is instead of making him, figure out how to do it himself.
Right.
Yeah.
So
definitely the same in math class.
There are pictures of numbers, there are pictures of cupcakes, there are pictures of my fence railing outside, there are pictures of interesting shadows, whatever. And it can be, even if you're like, well, it's really hard for people too to sometimes get away from, I have so much curriculum I got to cover. Well, take a picture of a question from your math textbook and put it on the screen. What do you notice? What do you wonder? And yes, first you'll have that uncomfortable waiting while they expect you to do it. So you have to get past that. And then yes, even if you're teaching grade 12 or 7 or 2, you will get the inevitable noticings of, there's numbers. Cool, great. whatever the kids say, I write it down. I write it down on the board visibly, and I attach a kid's name to it. Right away, you have now given ownership and voice to those kids in your room. They know what they say is valid, And they're going to go, oh, she wrote that down. Okay, well, I also noticed it's blue. Great. And inevitably, you will get that conversation going. And then, okay, what questions do you have? Why are we doing this? Fantastic. Let's have a conversation. How is this math? Excellent. Let's have a conversation. 5 minutes out of your day. And then if you're like, okay, well, if that's your starting point, start there and then go back to the way, continue on with your lesson, right? You don't have to change everything to start the revolution. You just need, it's like, I feel like I'm singing, I have a cheesy camp song in my head, right? It only takes a spark to get a candle burning or a fire, whatever that song is. Starting your class off with that really simple, like, okay, and then it sends a message to the kids too, that you expect them to participate. So that's always a good place to start, because it's low, there's not a lot of prep. It's about 5 minutes of your time. It's every kid can answer that question. Every kid can enter into that. And that's the first step, because so many kids walk through your door after grade 1 with this idea in their head, I can't do it. I can't do it. And if I wait long enough, somebody will do it for me, and then I'll get past that. So
Right. No, I think that is great advice. I love that. I think you mentioned a couple of really important things that I just want to make sure that people don't miss. One is that they might look at you like you're crazy the very first time you do something, right? And I think that can be a big barrier for some teachers trying different things in the classroom. But you always remember, in a way, it's a good thing, right? Because you're challenging them and you're mixing things up. And I think if you expect it, then you almost get used to it. I think sometimes, I don't know, I was so nervous the first few times I really made changes in my math classroom. And it was because I was afraid of that judgment and that silence, and what if things don't work out, But I think the more that you try things, the more you try different ideas to reimagine your math class, the more that you just sort of get used to that. And it becomes, sort of like with our students, we want them to feel okay trying things out and failing and then trying something else. And I think the same thing needs to be done for teachers. We need to be okay trying things out and being okay with it failing, because there might be, like, that first picture you put up on the wall might not actually be the best one to spark discussion, but you're never going to figure out which ones are great unless you try a few.
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and then the second thing I was going to add is that there's so many, maybe a good exercise could be to actually brainstorm what are different conversation starters for the start of class, right? For any given class, there might be multiple photos that you could use, or multiple questions, challenge problems, prompts. Sometimes I would even just, some of my favorite conversations have actually been not about math, but about how we study math, or discussions about math anxiety, stuff like that. So there's so many different things that you can do to mix things up at the beginning of class. And so I think that's great, and just trying it out and to keep trying, I think, until you find different things that work, and knowing that it's not a one time, it's going to fix everything, but it's a journey that can be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And I think the journey metaphor or imagery is something we absolutely need to bring back into the math classroom, because we have turned math into this discrete road of textbook chapters and linear concepts, and that it's like, here's the way, you stick to the way, right? But in reality, and this is something that, to share just a bit of my backstory, because I think it gives some context and some insight as to how I got where I am. I was the kid who wanted to be in the way. I wanted the pathway. My pathway was super narrow. And as long as what you asked me to do was in the pathway, I would do it. I could do it. I had zero knowledge of what actually I was doing, but I was super following the rules. I'm that type A, give me the Sudoku so I can fill in the numbers in the box kind of girl. That's how I was as a student. And when we make that if you happen to, like, fall off the path for whatever reason, you can't get back on. Like, it's, once you're off the tracks, it's, if you ask me something out here, I don't know it. I can't do it because I don't know it. I was that student that failed in math class because that was the expectation. And I felt that dread and I felt that sense of like, oh my, oh. And I brought that into my math classroom as a teacher, right? I was like, well, this is what I got to do. And when you look out at a sea of classes and you realize your students are making that face you made in class because you, right? Like I had that, oh my gosh, there has to be a better way. There has to be something different.
Yes.
And we turned it into this, but really learning, right, is this. And maybe we all get to the same spot, but sometimes if you're doing all the work, you're driving the train and the train arrives at the destination and there are no people on it, right? They didn't come with you out of the cart somewhere because they're not part of the journey. So it's going to be messy.
Mm-hmm.
And messy is okay.
Yes.
And
yes.
as teachers, we have to be okay with that. And we have to let kids know that it's messy is okay. Math is lots of times about clean and precise and nice pencil marks, but really it's about playing around with the numbers and seeing what works and why it works. And we're skipping that for kids. We're jumping them to the end. Here's your standard algorithm, memorize it, practice it 50 times. Well, why does it work? Who came up with that? And, the other big thing I say to people is don't be afraid of when the kids ask you, why are we doing this? Well, why are you doing it? If you can't tell a kid why you're doing what you're doing, then I would say, I hope you hear how passionate I am. I would say to you, stop doing it. If you can't say why, then you shouldn't be doing it because you as the teacher you're not the deliverer of content. You don't hold all the knowledge. That's Google. They can Google it.
I know.
But they can't figure out what to do with the Google or to know if the Google, I feel like I'm on a tangent now, but if they Google it and they don't know what to do with what Google told them, that's your job as a teacher. It's messy. It's a journey. You go on it together, and there will be days where you don't know the answer, and the kids will say, "Why, Miss? Why do I need to know how to find the area of a trapezoid?" I don't know. You might not actually need to know the area of a trapezoid in your actual life. Do you need to know how to take in information and look for patterns and work with numbers? Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and that brings me to, you had a quote in your most recent blog post that I actually cut and pasted it out because I loved it so much. And it really goes back to why we need math, right? And it's not just about, the rote memorization and math facts, but what you write is, I've come to realize that mathematics in its essence is about patterns and creativity and seeing numbers in a new way. It's about recognizing problems and then seeking answers. And often those answers are sought and worked out in community. It's messy and non-linear. It requires critical thinking. I like to think it requires a truly poetic soul, and I think that is why we need math, and for teachers to understand that and find different ways to share that with students, and also allow students going back to conversation, right? Allowing students to answer those questions, why math, is also important as well. I love the way you wrote that. Poetic soul.
The harsh reality is a lot of the curriculum we have to cover, kids don't need to know the specifics of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. To a non-math example, yesterday my grade 7 students were engaged in a task where they were given a list of populations, and I handed them an atlas and a map and a piece of, a pencil, and I said, I would like you to locate these 10 most densely populated cities in the world. And no, you can't use your Chromebook. I want you to use the atlas. First of all, they didn't even know what to do with it, right? They opened the table of contents. It doesn't say Tokyo on here anywhere. Like, okay, well, you have to use the index. So then I had to teach them how to use index. And ultimately, I know, like, if a kid turned to me and said, Mrs. Dean, why do I need to know this skill of looking up a city in an index, finding it on a map? reading the longitude and latitude of the map and placing it there. Why do I need to know that? My answer, honestly, and this would probably cause many people to fall off a chair, my answer would be to them, you don't. But what you do need to do is to know how to deal with, number one, not knowing what to do. Number two, how to get started. And number three, how to collate a whole bunch of different sources of information into one place.
Yes.
That's
what I could not agree more. Yes. It's not that that specific thing is what you need to know. It's that you need to be able to figure it out. You don't want to grow into an adult who doesn't know how to open a book and look where things are and put some information together. Being able to do that is super important.
Yeah. And somewhere along the line, I was having this conversation with a colleague yesterday, actually. Somewhere along the line, we have taken in as teachers that it is our job to make it easy, to make it easier for kids. When they don't know what to do, we feel, oh my gosh, I'm doing it wrong. I have to make it easier. I have to fix it. I have to solve it for them. Because it is hard to watch kids not know what to do for like a myriad of reasons. It's hard because you want to, I mean, you love your kids, right? It's like being a parent. You love your kids, but if you bail them out every single time, they don't know what to do with that feeling of, I don't know what to do. It's not our job to ask kids questions that they already know the answer to.
Right.
Right? If kids say to me, Mrs. Dean, this is hard. Fantastic. I'm doing it right. It's supposed to be hard.
Yes.
If I only ask you to do stuff you already know, then I'm not teaching you anything. And that's hard in math because it is hard to, it's hard. It's hard to work with numbers and not know what to do and feel nervous and look over at that kid next to you who knows their math facts really quickly or understands how numbers work and is kind of like blasting their way through. And let me tell you, they may be blasting their way through incorrectly. So there's a whole nother blog conversation for us. But if there was one thing that I would encourage teachers who are thinking about revolutionizing in any way, aside from getting that conversation going and that thinking going right away, is look for problems that are worthy of doing with your kids. Find that crazy, challenging problem that you look at and go, they can't do that. Fantastic. They will surprise you, right? There is a whole host of really great sites where you can find, your math textbook has some. The math textbook is
challenge problems.
This is how I started. When I needed to make the change, the first thing I did was I'm going to go to my textbook, and every chapter they do this for you. And they're not amazing all the time, but they have the right idea. There's those little problems that say explore. Now, often they've sort of cookbookized it for you in a textbook, right? It's a little bit like a recipe, like follow these steps to explore.
It's a start though. Yeah.
That's where you start.
Yeah.
You say, here's this thing. I want you to, don't tell them where it's from. Don't give them the textbook. Don't say, turn to page whatever, because then they're going to look at the title and the chapter and go, oh, this is an adding fractions question. I should add them. Take a picture, put it on your LCD, get a digital copy and share it on your whiteboard screen, do a screen share, put your kids in breakout rooms, have them talk about it, right? Take it out of the textbook, but start there. Give them a reason to talk and share and explore, and then have them share what they came up with, and then continue on. That's your place to start. And once you're ready to move on from there, there's a treasure trove of great, interesting problems out there. And it doesn't take any more work than looking through your textbook and picking what questions to answer, because that's the other thing I hear a lot of is, this is too much work for me. I can't do this. Oh, you realize you just sounded like your students right there. No, that's true, right? It's hard for teachers to change. We are such creatures of habit. Watch teachers in a staff meeting. They all sit in the same location, even when you tell them to sit somewhere else, right? We hold so tightly to what we have always done.
Right, right.
But it doesn't take, instead of going to your textbook to find a problem, do a Google search. There you go.
Right, right.
That's no more time. Find a cool problem. And if the problem is terrible and the kids are like, well, I don't know this, I guarantee you will have learned more about them as math students. You've learned something. You know what they know and don't know and can and can't do. That's
right.
So
yes. Oh, that's perfect. And I hate to do this, but we're at about a half hour already, and I want to keep talking. I wish, because I feel like we could keep talking for like 3 more hours on all of this. I feel like we just barely got started. But I'm trying to okay, let's do a quick recap of some of the really big points, because you packed in so much helpful information. So one of the very first things that you talked about was starting the class off with thinking, right? A photo or a question, some sort of conversation. So that way they know that they're walking into the classroom, not just passively learning. We talked about sort of experimenting with different things, and as teachers, not being afraid ourselves of failure, right? We're sort of role modeling that in a sense. I don't know that we use that word, but that was one of the things that we were talking about. Talked a lot about why math is important and integrating that into the classroom, right? Whether we're knowing how to explain it to students or having students explain it, and really getting past the simple math facts, right? And the fact that math is chaotic and I don't know, there's so many different words to use to describe it, but sort of, getting into that. And oh gosh, I don't know. There's so much more. There's so much more that you packed in there, but I think those are a few of the really big things. So I do want to thank you so much for all of these tips and the inspiration. Again, just sort of like how you write, the way that you talk about math is just very inspiring and motivating as a teacher. And I really appreciate having this time to interview you today.
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me. I think I like to think it's obvious when I get talking about how passionate I am about it. I absolutely love being a classroom teacher, but even more, I absolutely love helping other teachers see things differently. And I'm super thankful for the opportunity that you've given me today to share that with your followers and to be on the podcast and to share some of those ideas. And ultimately, though, I hope that other teachers hear this and think, oh my gosh, I can do it too. Or that's something I don't agree with. I want to continue that conversation, right?
Yes.
That's how we grow as educators, is we talk to each other and debate. We have arguments. My classroom is full of arguments at all times. Let's argue about it, kids. And
right.
That's how we grow. So I hope that has happened for somebody today, because
perfect. It definitely has, I think, for sure. For me, at the very least, definitely.
Yeah, excellent.
And before we go, because I know people are going to want to read your blog and find out more about you and follow you. So where can people find you and your writing?
So they can find me under, my blog is thedeanofmath.wordpress.com. And I use the same handle on Twitter and Instagram. And I have also recently, just this weekend, also started to feel a bit of a lifelong dream myself of having a very fledgling podcast right now, also called Unschooled. And there's just a very brief first episode on there right now about why I wanted to, what my background is and what I'm hoping to accomplish. But this notion of having these conversations like we're having today, to think about ways where we can peel back some of those norms that are there and think about really getting back to the heart of what learning really is. So you can find that it's on the Anchor app, but it's also available on Spotify. And so I would love to see some people there as well. So you can find me.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to check out the podcast. That'll be very fun. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for listening today. I will see you next time on the next interview. Thanks. Bye.